So, hi everyone, welcome to YA ThrillerCon 2020. I'm so excited by this, and I almost can't believe the con is here. I've spent so long planning it and arranging all these panels with so many amazing authors, and it's just amazing that we're actually doing it right now. So, yeah, a quick introduction about the con. I set this up as a 100% online festival to celebrate everything YA thriller. We've got 6 amazing panels lined up across today and tomorrow, as well as interviews with authors and some exclusive readings too. So yeah, to find the schedule for the con, please visit yathrillercon.co.uk. And this today is our very first panel, so I'm joined by 3 amazing authors. We've got Nia, Sarah and Barry, and we're going to be discussing what we love about YA thrillers, our favourite books that we always recommend, and why this genre appeals to us. So yeah, if you're watching live, and I can see people live already, you can use the comments facility on the YouTube window. It should be right next to where the video is. And you can just write in comments or any questions, and then you can answer those live as well. So it's a very good opportunity to sort of interact with us as we're discussing all these things. So yeah, anyway, introductions. Nia, would you like to go first to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Nia. I write YA, MG, and adult thrillers, as well as science fiction fantasy. I also teach high schoolers, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. I teach biology, 10th grade lit, and a super cool section of AP bio.
Nice. That makes you sound so busy.
Yeah, I am.
Right, and all that. Oh my gosh.
Right?
Sarah, do you want to go next with introductions?
Sure. I am Sarah. I publish under the name S.E. Anderson. I mostly focus on YA science fiction, and I have recently come out with a YA contemporary novel. I have not written any YA thrillers yet, but I'm a massive fan. I'm here as a reader and a fan of the genre. Love it. And in my free time, I am a PhD candidate working on astrophysics and focusing on comets.
Nice. So you're very busy as well then.
I don't have to deal with kids. I got myself. I do my comics. I come home. I write a book.
Barry, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am Barry Lyga. I've since 2006, I've published, I guess, 24 novels, several of which are thrillers, all YA or middle grade. I'm all over the map. I've done, literary coming of age novels. I've done crazy serial killer novels. I've done superhero novels. I've done everything. I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And that's it. I feel like an underachiever because I'm not also teaching and getting a PhD in astrophysics or anything like that. I just sit here and write all day when my kids aren't bothering me. So that's me.
24 books in 14 years.
Yeah. When I sit down and do the math, I go, how's that? I think I would be more tired, but no, yeah, somehow I did that.
Great. So yeah, that's just a phenomenal amount of books.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll introduce myself as well because I've just realized I forgot to do that. So I am Madeline Dyer. I write YA dystopians and YA thrillers. My latest release was actually a YA thriller set in a dystopian world. So that was just me sort of combining the 2 genres I absolutely love. So yeah, I'm mainly a full-time writer. I also do some freelance editing, and my family runs a Shetland pony stud where we breed Shetland ponies. So when I'm not writing, I'm out in the fields just training our ponies. So yeah.
I can't handle how cute they are.
Yeah, all my social media is just full of photos of them all the time. So yeah, they are really cute, especially the foals.
They're tiny. They're so small.
So yeah, let's talk about YA thrillers then. So my first question for all of you is, have you always loved crime fiction and thrillers? And which crime or thriller books inspired you when you were younger? So who would like to go first, or shall I just pick one of you?
Need a random number generator.
Right.
I should
have been more prepared.
In the wheel.
So, okay, I'm going to pick Barry to answer this first.
Okay. The easy answer is yeah. I have always loved crime fiction and thrillers and mysteries. When I was younger, I read the Encyclopedia Brown books when I was very young. And in fact, there's an homage to those books in my I Hunt Killers series. But my father was and still is a voracious reader, and all he read was thrillers. And this was in the 80s. This was during the Cold War. So it was always, a retired CIA agent comes out of retirement to take on either the Soviet Union or the Nazis, who it turns out are still around, or sometimes Nazis who've infiltrated the Soviet Union. Those were the best. And we used to joke that any book with a swastika or a hammer and sickle on the cover, he would just buy it without knowing anything about it. So I ended up reading a lot of those books because they were around the house. Read a lot of stuff as a kid that I probably was not prepared for emotionally or psychologically, which probably turned me into the warped human being I am today. But yeah, no, I've always read this stuff. Next victim.
Nia, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I've always loved it and I've always read it. Like, my answer is about to really reveal my age, but when I was super little, my grandmother was like really into like the crime and like procedural, like legal thrillers. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of these, but like In the Heat of the Night, and CSI was even coming on way back when, so I had to watch those before I could actually watch my cartoons, right? But then when I got a little bit older, my mom is a huge like Sandra Brown and John Grisham fan. So whenever I was in between the kidlit books, I would always just go to her shelf. And like you said, Barry, you probably read a lot of things I was not ready for. And then really just focusing on like the YA genre. Again, this is way back when, but the Fear Street thriller books by R.L. Stine and like the Sweet Valley High super thrillers, I think when I was younger, that's what really just like cemented my love for the thriller genre, and especially when it's focusing on teens.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love thrillers like that focus on teens, and just like the YA readership is just like this really amazing readership, I think. And I have tried writing like adult thrillers, but I'm just not as like emotionally invested in it, I found, and I'm just like adult readership. So yeah, and Sarah, would you like to answer that question as well?
Well, when I was like thinking through this question, my first answer was going to be no, that my love of crime fiction thrillers has been recent. But I was thinking back, and it turns out the first series that I read front to back was Nancy Drew. I love Nancy Drew books, and my mom loved them too. So her collection of her own childhood Nancy Drew books were like the first books in English I had at home that I could like binge read, and literally binge read like for hours on end. Like Nancy Drew was life. So I think my answer is that I must have had that scene planted really young. I mean, Nancy Drew, I need to reread them. Like, they're fun. They're good little bites of crime novels. Although I've recently gotten back into the series with like YA thrillers exploding recently. But it's a genre that has always been near and dear to my heart, but never on the forefront. Well, until now. Now it's just like, give me more.
Yeah, like, I get what you mean about sort of like thinking that it's more like a recent thing that you've become interested in, because like when I was thinking about this question as well, I was like mainly thinking that I really became like interested in detective fiction and crime fiction when I was at university, because like I studied a module on detective fiction, and like I loved The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That was like what I wrote a lot of my essays on, sort of like that the first book and the trilogy. But then when I was thinking about which books I really liked as a child, like I liked Enid Blyton's The Famous Five books. Yes. And then like as sort of like a teenager as well, I was reading a lot of Agatha Christie. But I just kind of like didn't put it together that like I've sort of been reading like crime and mysteries like the whole of my life pretty much. Like I don't know why I only sort of like thought of it as a recent thing, and especially when I started writing YA thrillers as well. But yeah, I can definitely see like I've been influenced from like a really young age as well. So yeah. So anyway, the next question: what is it about the thriller genre that appeals to you most as a reader and as a writer? Now, shall I pick people again to answer this, or start having a discussion? I feel a bit mean just like picking people.
I'll volunteer as tribute. You know what? I think it's really just they give you like the mystery like up front, in like those first few opening pages. And I'm just a really big person as a reader and a writer. Once I have the what if and what the heck is going on seed planet, at that point I just have to fly through the pages, because I'm like, I hate not like knowing the full story and all the details. So I'm like, I need to know what the heck is going on and like put all the pieces together. So it's like reading and solving one huge like Rubik's Cube as you're reading. And that's just what I love about it the most.
I completely agree. That's pretty much my answer in one go. I like a book that doesn't let me zone out. It engages me, and the intrigue just drags me through. And I like trying to solve the crime before the character. And then when the twists happen and it's not what I expect, then I'm just like, I love it even more. And I remember when I was in middle school, my English teacher wanted to prove how good crime and good mysteries, they allow you to solve it before the actual character does. And so she gave us once a week, we got a new page from the same Sherlock Holmes story. And, you know, we had to get to the ending before the character does. And I just remember that exercise being so fun, because we were sitting around like debating these crazy theories. And at the end, we were right. And we were so thrilled to be right. So I think just being engaged all the way through this book, it's an experience. I love it.
That is an amazing strategy, and I am taking that for my classroom.
Do it.
That sounds
awesome. See, this isn't just for the audience. We're all learning things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have a notepad here. I'm going to be taking notes on book reviews for you guys.
Same.
Oh, lovely notepad.
You know, somebody once told me that the difference between a mystery and a thriller. A mystery is who done it, and a thriller is how are we going to stop it. And I think that's what I like about the thriller is there is that element of trying to figure it out, but it's propulsive. It pulls you through the story because you know something bad is going to happen, and the question is, how do you stop it, and can it be stopped in time by the characters? And you know, if you're a really engaged reader, you're challenging yourself at the same time to figure out how to stop it before the characters can. But I think that's what I've always enjoyed about it.
Definitely, yeah. Like, I just really love to be scared when I'm reading as well, and I just love the tension in thrillers and just like being able to sort of like read it and like in a safe place, but feel scared at the same time, because like I'm sort of like in control of that fear that I'm feeling when I'm reading it. So yeah, like that really appeals to me. And yeah, I was just thinking as well, with what you were all saying, that one of the reasons I particularly like YA thrillers is because it sort of shows like ordinary teenagers solving like all these mysteries. And I was just thinking, I prefer YA over adult thrillers, mainly because a lot of adult thrillers, you've got like these police detective characters with all sorts of resources that like the average person doesn't have access to. So like these YA thrillers show us like anyone practically can solve like a mystery or a crime or stop something from happening. And yeah, I think that's why I really like YA thrillers, and like why the genre really appeals to me, because it does give you like this sort of sense of control as well, and just like being scared and like it's the anticipation of being scared that I really like. I'm just like, I want to turn the pages faster and faster because I know like it's all like building up, and I need to find out who's like the villain. But yeah, it's just like a really delicious feeling. So yeah,
I love that too.
Yeah.
Just when you see a character in a situation that you can feel like if you were there, you would be losing it. And so that tension, you share it with that character. And then when they get out of the situation using their own wits or smarts, it's kind of empowering in a way, especially with young characters for young people, because you can use your smarts and your own powers to get out of a situation. I just love that. It feels good.
Yeah, if you're a teenager, if you're a teenager stuck in a thriller, you can't call for backup. You know, you have to figure it out. You have to get out. And I think that sort of that takes a genre and sort of strips it down. You know, when I talk to kids, I do this whole routine about how difficult it is to get away with crime, because the science of forensics has gotten so good, and it's sort of unfair to the criminals. You know, they do all this hard work planning these crimes, and then CSI comes in and in 5 minutes figures it out. And I think, by taking away all those resources, as you were saying before, I think you sort of strip down the genre to its bare essentials, and you make it a little more thrilling and a little more fraught and perilous, because there aren't all of these resources to back you up.
Mm-hmm. And in that same vein, not only do you not have resources, but for the most part, people don't believe you. When you're a teenager and you're going on about crazy schemes, like my friend was kidnapped and something's going on, they're like, no, they ran away. You need to stop and understand. Yeah. And that indignation, do you remember what it's like to not have a voice in those kinds of situations? When you're a teenager and you're like, no one is listening to me and I know what's going on. That's still, it's one of those feelings that you connect with and it angers you. Another reason for thrillers.
Yeah, I just love it is really empowering, as you say, and reading because I was reading a lot of thrillers towards my late teens, and I was finding I was really identifying with the characters more in that genre than I was in other genres, because I was reading a lot of YA fantasy as well, but I really related a lot more to the main characters and narrators in the thrillers, because it's although I wasn't obviously solving all these murders at the time, I did sort of relate to things that they were doing and struggles that they were having. But the thriller genre just sort of emphasizes a lot more. So yeah, what are your favorite tropes within this genre then?
Well, I mean, as you said, I like it when a character knows the truth. And part of the thriller about, as you said, trying to get it to stop, to solve this crime in time. The problem is that the people that could be helping are not. And having to take that, I love when a character has to do it all themselves. And I as much as I hate frustration, I like feeling that frustration of they're not listening. I got to do it myself. I love it.
I think a thriller lives and dies on its plot twists. There are certainly genres of fiction that can get away without plot twists or without significant plot twists. There are certainly genres of fiction where the emotional or personal epiphany is the main point of the story, and that's fine. And I love those pieces. But in a thriller, if you're not turning your plot 2 or 3 times over the course of the book in a very surprising, unexpected way, your readers are going to find that they are pretty bored. And you're probably boring yourself while you're writing it too. So I think, the well-placed plot twist is really important.
Yeah, I
really like swapped identities where one character either maliciously slinks into the life of another one and is trying to take it over, or where you have the switch at birth or whatever along the way, and they don't actually know that they're living in each other's in each other's switched lives. I'm always a sucker for that all the time. And this probably goes back again to the 96 movie A Long Kiss Goodnight with Gina Rodriguez and Samuel L. Jackson, and then even the Bourne Identity. But I really love just the assassin that doesn't remember that they are living, that they used to live that assassin life. And they're just normal everyday person, and then something happens that jars their memory or throws them back into the danger, and then they're running from their previous handler or the government, and they just have to deal with the fallout.
Yeah, I love thrillers sort of about memory, and especially when it's an unreliable narrator as well, and especially if they don't know they're an unreliable narrator. like, oh, I just love unreliable narrators at the moment. Like one of my manuscripts that I've just sent it to my agent, that's got an unreliable narrator in, and I just found it so much fun to write, and it did have like a lot more sort of like twists that I was putting into it as well, because like my narrator didn't really like remember what had happened, so like I just had like this extra sense of like freedom and flexibility I found with what I was writing. So, but yeah, I do find that like with unreliable narrators, you've got to be like quite careful as well, because you don't want it to just sort of like be able to use it sort of as an excuse to justify anything that's happening in the plot. Like I think there are sort of like parameters that you've got to stick within that. But yeah, like other tropes that I love, like I adore thrillers where there's twins as like the main characters, and yeah.
I'm married to a twin, so I'm not allowed to write those kind.
Yeah. I also adore like how, you know, in One of Us is Lying, and in Catherine Muggy's The 1,000th Floor, I love when a body is dropped up front and then you have to spend the rest of the novel figuring out like who died and why they died and who the murderer is and why. And then you come to love all of the main characters and you just want to protect and save them all. And you're like, no. That's one of my favorite tropes too.
Yeah, opening like Ed McBain, who wrote the 87th Precinct novels, which has got to be some kind of record for longevity in a series. I think that series went on for 50 years. He said in an interview once, always start with a body. Like page one, start with a body. And that's like when I wrote I Hunt Killers, that's why I started. The first thing that happens is, oh, there's a body right there. Like, can't avoid it. That's the kind of book you're in. There's a body. And yeah, I think starting off with a dead body is usually a pretty good way to go.
You guys have me wanting to write a thriller,
I really
right?
like when you right? I really like when authors play with the line between thriller and supernatural. Like The Evolution of Madeline Dyer by Michelle Hodgkin does it really well. And I remember reading that YA book, and just the whole time you're like, it's something like real life worldly going on with this character, or is it more like supernatural? And she does a fantastic job. Like, you never actually know the truth of what the heck is going on, or if the character is just completely like imagining things. Like, you never know until near the end, and you're like,
Yeah, I mean, if it can keep you guessing until the very end, that's a really, really good book.
Yeah.
I like books, I think, that cross that genre line, as you said. So, like, not just a YA thriller, but a thriller that's also a sci-fi. Or it's like, it's a fantasy, but the story is a thriller. I love that. And as I was realizing it, I have written a YA thriller. The third book of Starstruck is Murder on the Orient Express. I wrote a thriller, you guys. It has a black hole.
Yeah, I mean, thriller. It's a very flexible. It's a very flexible genre. It can fit into, you can have romance thrillers, you can have horror thrillers, you can have science fiction thrillers, you can have superhero thrillers. You can do a lot with a thriller.
Yeah. Have any of you read The Walls Around Us by Nova Suma? Because that's like this ghostly thriller, and like, it's an amazing book. And when I like started reading it, like, I thought it was just sort of like dark contemporary, and then it got like this huge thriller vibe going, and I was so sucked in, I could not stop reading it. Like, I should have been working and not just reading it. But yeah, and then suddenly it like brings in like this supernatural ghostly element as well. And as soon as like I realized that was sort of becoming a prominent element, I realized that it had already set the foundations for that at the start, for like all the ghostly stuff to happen. So it wasn't like this huge sort of like change in genre like midway through, but it really like surprised me, and it felt like a really good twist in the way that it's been set up. And yeah, since I've read that, like, I've just been really like loving all these like YA thrillers that have like this ghostly aspect, or sort of like horror as well, and supernatural, because yeah, it really is just so flexible.
So fun.
So yeah, we've already sort of been talking about this a bit, but like our next question is what makes a good YA thriller? And yeah, we have like touched on like quite a lot already,
Yeah.
like, what we really like. But yeah, I was wondering about sort of like structures. Are there any sort of like structures that you really like? Because like for me, I love the ones where like the action is told in a non-linear narrative, and I love having like flashbacks used, but when they're used well, and especially if it's like playing into like the whole unreliable narrator. So yeah, are there any sort of like structures of YA thrillers that you really adore?
Well, I've been reading Sadie recently.
Oh yeah.
So close to finish. I wanted to finish it before this panel, but I didn't get time. But them using a true crime podcast as the flashbacks was so clever, especially since I'm really into My Favorite Murder at the moment. Such a good true crime podcast. But using that like real life type element to tell the story in such a unique way, it was so unique. It just stood out for me, and it really pulled me into the story, especially since the main character was not one who likes to reveal a lot. She kept a lot to herself, and the podcast really opened up a lot of these things, and it allows the character to be their character without having to like go out of their way for exposition. It gives the character the freedom to be and to tell you the story how they see it.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I was going to say that structurally, I tend to enjoy thrillers that, you know, I used the word propulsive before. I tend to like thrillers that just start at A and take me straight through to Z. But I realized the one I'm working on right now is set in two different eras. It's set in 1986, and then it's also set in the present. And so it's going back and forth from those two times with something like 7 different point of view characters. And there is a podcast in the book as well. So it is a complicated structure. So I think if you can use the structure to enhance the tension, I think that's a good thing. Sometimes I think there are some writers who will use the structure to hide things that they weren't skillful enough to hide in the plot, and that sort of annoys me. But yeah, as long as the structure of it ramps up the tension and plays fair with the reader, I think that's great.
Yeah, structurally, I think I spoke to this before, but I like when you get the ending first. I mean, that's not flushed out and not super detailed, but you get a glimmer of the ending, or that, oh shoot, what the heck is just happened moment. And you get that up front, and then we rewind back to the beginning to tell the reader how we led up to that moment.
Yeah, I really like that, because like it's sort of like all the jigsaw pieces coming together, and like
Yeah.
like you can see like the bigger picture and how it all slots together. And especially if like as you've been reading and you come across like loads of different like subplots, and you think, how is the author going to connect all this? And then they do, and it just like works perfectly. Like that is just such an amazing feeling, like as a reader, and it's just so satisfying. So yeah, like, I was just thinking with the current thriller that I'm writing, like although I love like non-linear narratives, this one is sort of like a straight like A through to Z. So it is very different for me, but I'm finding that I am quite enjoying it as well, which is like quite unexpected, because it's like a very different structure to how I've written thrillers before. But yeah, like I have been using like screenwriting books. Have you read Save the Cat?
Love
Yes.
Save the Cat.
Yeah. So,
I just bought Save the Cat Writes a Novel yesterday.
It's in my basket.
Yes, get it. It's amazing.
so yeah, I've been
I like
using the beat sheet.
Save the Cat Goes to the Movies is really helpful.
Okay, I have to add that one too. Okay.
Yeah, because that one, he just takes a bunch of movies and shows you how they break down into the various structures that he set up in the first book. And it just, if you're like me, you learn best by examples. And so instead of just here's the structure you should follow, it's here's the structure you should follow. And then in this book, I'm going to show you how these movies you've already seen follow this structure. And it really helps cement it in your head.
Do you find though, once you're like really familiar with like these different structures, that you can then predict the endings of like other films more or
Right.
other books?
Yes.
Yeah, well, once you get into really writing and devouring books, you start to realize that a lot of plots start looking the same. But then when an author comes and throws you something so new, such a wild card, then you're just like, congratulations, you got it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about thrillers, is that there are so many ways for the authors to fall into the same structure and the same story. And the ones that manage to stay fresh and unique, I mean, that it's hard at this point. How many thrillers are there out there? How much has been done?
It's really tough to do something new and original. It's very difficult, especially when so much of a thriller is sort of backloaded. Like so much of what makes it different happens at the end with the resolution. And how do you keep the reader, going along without them thinking, oh, I've seen this story before, and get them to the end where they can say, oh, I've never seen this story before.
Yeah, like it's all sort of like about the execution of the idea and like what sort of like how you're going to bring something new to it as well. And
Right.
I really like that challenge, but like I always find that like I think I've like come up with something like new, and then the next like YA thriller I read will have like something so similar. And it's just, like, at that point, because I'm like, no. But yeah, it's just I find it quite addictive in a way, just like trying to sort of like think of new ways to sort of like execute like an idea that has been done before, but in like a way that feels so like fresh and new. And yeah, like combining it with like another genre or something, or like even like another idea within a thriller, like I find that is really helpful to me as a writer, just sort of like thinking of all these different ways that I could like make it different. But then often I find that like no matter how much I plan, like I will free write it, and like my characters sort of like dictate what is going to happen anyway. Because I don't know, do any of you like plan extensively before you write?
Not at all.
Okay.
I'm just in awe, because seeing writers who write massive thrillers with all these webs, how can you not have sat down and like worked all that out? I can't. I physically can't. If I were to write a thriller, I would have to like plan everything out, like notepads full of craziness.
See, I normally just work it all out in like edits, because if I plan everything out, for some reason I just lose enthusiasm for the story if I know what's going to happen. So I kind of have to let myself enjoy the plot twist and the turns that the characters will swing and the story will swing my way. And obviously normally my first drafts are a hot mess. And then in revisions I have to go through and do the detailed mapping and the plotting and all of that nitty gritty work to make the webs all connect and make sense. Yeah.
My secret is not remotely as interesting. I just write the book out of order.
Okay.
There we go.
So I write it and then I go, oh, I know how this is going to end. And so I write the end, and then I'm writing along and I'm like, oh, in the middle, I'll have to do this. So I jump in and I write that. And I just, as I'm writing it, as I'm figuring it out, I write it. And then, if I establish something at the end of the book, I haven't already written the beginning, so I don't have to rewrite anything. I just go back and write it to set that up. And that's basically how I do it.
That's actually super interesting. Yeah, because I cannot write out of order to save my life. I know. And it's a disaster every time. Like I have to know what happened before, so like I can set up my emotional beats. Otherwise, it's just no. So that's like super, super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I started doing that a while back. And I just found that it really worked for me. So, and it's not like people can tell. It's not like when they sit down to read the book, they go, he wrote this part on Tuesday, but he wrote this part on Sunday. You can write the book in any order you want. Nobody's going to know. So they're going to read it one page at a time, no matter how you write it.
Yeah, definitely. Like with my manuscripts, I'm just thinking like how I sort of like go about writing it does vary depending on like the project, because there's one that I wrote sort of like pretty much in order, although it was like a non-linear order anyway, but I kind of like wrote it in the order that the reader would read it. But then in my other I was just like writing it sort of like, I was thinking of it very much as a patchwork, where I was just sort of like writing with bits that interested me at the time, and then later, like in edits, I was just like trying to put it all together. And yeah, that was just like such a mess, that first draft, because like it was just all over the place. And there were just like characters popping up here and there who were never like in any other scenes or anything. And then I also have like this problem with when I'm writing a draft where I end up with characters with rhyming names, where like the first name rhymes with the last name. And that happens to me in every single manuscript, and I don't know why. But yeah, I just like found out, just reading through like a draft recently, I've got a character whose first name is Ruby and her surname is Newbury, and I don't know how I didn't spot that. So yeah, I just like but yeah, when I'm writing these thrillers, like I can't plan it because Nia, as you were saying, like I'm just not like motivated to keep writing if I've already planned it. And I think it's because like I've already written it and I already know what's going to happen. And I just need to be sort of like constantly surprised as I'm writing and feel that like I'm sort of like invested in this as much as like my main character is, especially if they're like solving a mystery or trying to stop something bad from happening.
Yeah.
So I feel that I very much need to be sort of like on the same page as my main character all the time. Like we're sort of like exploring this all together. But yeah, it does give me so much extra work to do in edits. And I just like, I always say to myself, like, there must be a more efficient way to do this without like sacrificing sort of like my need for like not knowing the story beforehand. But then every time I then always spend so many months afterwards like trying to actually work out what I've written, like which parts of it are actually salvageable. So yeah,
the struggle is real.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, it's hard because you're telling yourself the story, and at one point you've heard the story so many times that you kind of start losing faith in it. That's something I there's a point of editing that I just hate because I've read the book so many times that I'm like, nah, there's nothing new here. No one's gonna find this surprising, when in fact it's just that I really had my nose stuck against it for the past 2 years or however long.
With my very first book, my very first novel, by the time we got to the page proof stage, I hated the book so much that I actually this is a true story, new author story. I called my editor and said, we should not publish this book.
Oh wow!
I said this is not a good book. I said I've written another book in the meantime. Why don't we publish this one instead? And she said, Barry, calm down. It's a fine book. We're going to publish it. But I had gotten to the point where one of the little known things about being an author that people don't understand is that you read your own book so many times before it's published, and familiarity breeds contempt. And you just get to the point where you just hate that book. That book came out 14 years ago, and I think it's only now that I can actually look at it without like shivering in revulsion. So yeah, I tried to get my own first book canceled.
And now look at you, 14 books later.
24 books later, 14 years.
14 years. Oh my God.
Yeah, I haven't tried to cancel anything since then. I wised up. I realized that they make you give the money back. So
right. I haven't been able to
get that feeling.
What's that?
You want to cancel it, like? Do you still like get that feeling of like when you've read each book so many times? Do you still get like that same feeling of like wanting to cancel it? Like, or does it get easier?
No. I don't get the feeling that I want to cancel it, but I do just I do get the feeling of because I've done it enough times now. I just get tired of it. I'm just like, I get to the point where I'm like, all right, I'm just done. But I've done it enough times now, and the books have come out, and so far, nobody has said, wow, like this is a really terrible. Well, some people have said that, but in general, the general response has not been, this is a terrible book. So I've internalized the idea that my reaction to the book past a certain point is not a valid or objective reaction in any sense. And that I just have to trust that past Barry knew what he was doing, and that my editor knows what she's doing, and that when the book gets out there, people will like it. and I will have to go out there and pretend that I like it, so that people won't go, "What's wrong with this guy?" But no, I haven't tried to cancel anything since that first one.
Okay.
Editors are amazing, though. Shout out to editors for being not only
Yes, they are.
They're cheerleaders at the same time. They have to keep us from falling apart. Like, that is a job.
And not only that, but they have to read the book almost as many times as you do.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to maintain their enthusiasm to keep people at the publishing house excited. You know, I can read it and go, ugh, and then I can just go play Xbox for an hour. They have to read it and kind of go, "Oh, I'm so tired of this book," and then walk into a meeting and say, "This is the greatest book we're going to publish this season. We need to put a lot of money behind it and really promote it and get it out there." They don't have the luxury of playing Xbox for an hour to turn off their brain. So yeah, editors have a whole different set of problems that they go through. I don't know how they're able to read these books over and over again and look at them with any sort of neutrality or objectivity. I would not be able. I would be the world's worst editor, because I'd read the book twice and then I'd say to the author, "Look, I'm kind of done with this now." It was good the first time.
Yeah, shout out to agents too, because I feel like they do. I just finished a round of edits, and like you said, Barry, the whole time I was working on it, this is like edit 5 or 6, and I was like, "This is all terrible," and I like gritted through it and sent it to my agent, and she was like texting me her reactions as she was reading, and she was like, "I'm crying at this part, and I'm gushing at this part," and I'm like, "Oh, so it is good." And she's like,
exactly.
Right. And I'm like, I'm glad you think that, because the whole time I was just like, "Oh, why did my editor buy this book? What is going on?" Past me, what was past me doing? And I'm like, "Oh, past me actually wrote a really good book. Present me just can't see that right now."
Yep. The good news is someday future you will realize it. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm worried it's going to be the opposite, that future me is going to go back and read the debut novel and go like, "Oh, wow, this is far worse than I've ever imagined."
Oh, well, I mean, you're always going to see stuff in there that you wish you had done differently, especially as time goes on and you grow as a person and, and the culture changes around you and all that. I mean, my book was published in 2006. I wrote it in 2004. And I mean, I'm proud of the way it holds up to the extent that it does. But certainly, if you gave me a week with that manuscript again, I'd change some things, no question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. They really reflect who you are, like, as a person at that time of writing.
Yeah,
that's something I've been thinking about quite a lot recently, because so I started off writing YA dystopian with like these strong fantasy elements. And then a couple of years ago, I had like some brain inflammation, and I became like really unwell with that, and I lost like my ability to speak during that time, and I couldn't communicate, couldn't write at all. And then when I started recovering and I started writing again, I couldn't write like fantasy anymore. Like, it just felt like when I was reading like through these manuscripts, like partial manuscripts that I'd written, I couldn't recognize it as my own work. And since then, my writing style has changed dramatically. And it's since then that I've been writing YA thrillers. So yeah, like my last release was like a combination of dystopian and thriller, because I had like this ongoing dystopian series I hadn't finished. I was like, well, I need to like try and finish it. But that book is just so much more like a thriller. And when I started out writing it, like, I didn't intend it to be a thriller. But yeah, my editor was just saying, yeah, this is really like a thriller, just set in this dystopian world. And she was saying like how different it was to like the rest of my books in that series. And yeah, I was just finding it really interesting. And then recently I went back to my debut, which was 2015, and I was just like reading it, and it's like I can kind of see myself in it still now, because like some of my writing style is still the same, but I was just noticing all these differences. And it's kind of like there's like the old me for like writing before my brain inflammation, and then there's like the new me writing afterwards. And yeah, I'm really drawn to like writing dark contemporary thrillers now. Whereas before I wasn't. Like, although like you have got like darkness and like in dystopian, so like there are some like tentative links still. It's like very, very different. And yeah, I just find that really fascinating how like your writing does reflect like who you are like at that time and what's going on around you and everything.
I wonder how our writing's going to be affected by the current global pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I already tried. I had I'm working on something right now that I'm doing some revisions on, and you know, part of the book is set in 1986, but originally when I wrote the first draft, the present part of the book is set in 2021, which is when the book comes out. And so as I was doing the revision, I realized, oh, 2021 is going to be COVID world. So I had some references, you know, to COVID and the pandemic and everything. And my editor said to me when she was reading it, she goes, at first I got really caught up in that and I thought it was really great. And you did a really good job weaving in those references and it felt very natural. She said, but the problem is this book's coming out in a year and we don't know what the world's going to look like in a year. You know, you've got these kids getting together to talk about this mystery. Would they be allowed out of the house in a year? We don't know. And that's all true. We don't know. And we're not going to know for a while how this is going to affect our writing because we have no perspective on it right now. So I took out all that stuff and, you know, you guys have probably heard this, the decision in fiction right now is that all books take place in 2019. Because nobody knows. And it's too bad too, because I had some really good Trump 2020 jokes in there that I had to take out. And I was very angry that I had to take them out, but you know, you got to do it. So yeah, everything takes place in 2019 until we see the back end of this and know what it's going to look like on that side.
Yeah, I can't remember who posted it, but I read this really insightful thread on Twitter that was basically talking about that same thing. For contemporary writers, if you're writing a book, you know, set in 2020 or 2021 or, you know, the near future, like, are you writing it from the perspective that COVID just was never a thing?
Right.
Are you writing it? Yeah. Are you just ignoring it and like that didn't happen in this book world? Or are you writing it from the viewpoint of COVID is and perhaps it's still an ongoing thing because we don't know when it's going to end or how the world will look past it. And that's definitely like a challenge for contemporary writers who are, you know, in the drafting or even the planning and plotting stages right now. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, like my current manuscript that's out on sub at the moment. At the start of this year, well, it was about February or March, like I did some more edits on it and then I realized I'd used like all 2020 dates in it. I was just like, wow, my characters are not social distancing here. And I just made it for like the year before. So yeah, just like redoing my calendar in the book. But yeah, it is such a weird time because like, as you say, we don't know how long this is going to last and like the impact that it is going to have on like our own writing.
Right.
Like not just like in terms of like the years that books are set, but also like it is kind of difficult to be creative in a pandemic as well because like it's just so draining. And I found that like I'll either be writing loads of words, like 4,000 or 5,000 words a day, or I'll do absolutely no words at all. And it's like I'm all from one to the other, and like I can't sort of like get the balance right. And yeah, it's really unpredictable.
Well, it's also tough if you have kids at home.
Oh, yeah.
Right. With nowhere to go.
This has affected how I write about solitude because I lost it. I physically could not sit down and write at the worst of it. I spent the first month of confinement, because in France they shut everything down. You couldn't go outside. So a whole month completely by myself. And I just completely lost it. Like I lost track of time, but to a point where I was waking up in the middle of the night, like that was my morning, and it was just off the charts. But it's completely changed how I write about solitude. On top of how I write. Honestly, I haven't managed to get a good rhythm back in a long time. I miss going to cafes and writing. I miss going to write with friends. It's just, it doesn't feel right to write. But on another note, though, like my young adult sci-fi series is humor, and it's completely based on in an absurd world, the only way we can react to this crazy absurdity is through humor. But at this point, the absurdity of the world is so much that I can't write anything more absurd than that. Like everything I write down, like when you hear about the murder hornets, you're just like, okay, This is
Right, exactly.
great news these days. Everything that we hear in the news, you think it's an Onion article, but it's not. It's real. And
I
so
was
trying
so
to write
angry. I was
fiction
so
right now.
angry about Murder Hornets. I was so angry about Murder Hornets because I had just finished writing a superhero novel with a character who controls these robot bees.
Oh no.
And it was done and it was locked. And I was like, damn it, if I had known about the Murder Hornets, I would have called the character Murder Hornet. Like,
Yes. Bank on the crazy.
exactly. I'm like, once again, reality has outstripped fiction. Ah, man.
Yeah. So my YA, anything absurd, I just can't even get it out of my brain right now. It's not.
It's tough. It's tough.
Things will get better. We'll write again.
Yeah.
They will.
I know as a reader, there's every time I try to escape into a book and suddenly they talk about either being alone or just being quarantined, I just immediately go like, nope, that is not.
See, for me, it's the opposite. Anytime there's like a crowd in a book, I just go, no, that wouldn't happen. No way. There wouldn't be that many people. Or, you know, it's strange watching TV and movies that were made pre-pandemic because all these people just walking around and running around and holding hands and doing all these sketchy things that we're not allowed to do anymore. And
Did you watch the Dragon capsule, the astronauts going up to the space station?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
So I was watching that and I'm like super excited. And the astronauts float in and embrace. They just hug.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
You know?
You're not allowed to do that. Don't do that. You got to quarantine for 2 weeks.
just feels weird. It just feels weird.
So what are you all currently working on now then? Like if you're able to work in like the current conditions with creativity levels and all of that.
I'm working on my Wizard of Oz in space story with clones. I've been working on it for 4 years off and on, and it is just, it's coming together. It's just fighting me every step of the way, but it's happening.
I love the chapters that you've sent me about so far.
That's a relief because I just, it's too early in the process for me to hate it as much as I do. I love it, but I hate it. It's my belligerent child.
I'm attempting to make the most of quarantine and juggle multiple projects. It's not as productive as I thought it would be, but it's slowly picking up. I just sold my debut, which is actually an adult fantasy. This is called the Praetorian Trials. It's coming out 2022 with Harper Voyager, but it is very much about a 19-year-old who she's a warrior, but there's also a body that gets dropped up front. And while she's in this fantasy world with this cool like blood magic meets like tech, she also has to kind of figure out the conspiracy behind a family member's death and bring his killers to justice. I'm also working on a middle grade novel that's very much, it has nothing to do with anything dark and gloomy. It's like magical and wondrous about magicless witches. And it's just I need to step away from the depressing stuff for a minute and draft this. And the very last thing is a YA thriller that's an ensemble cast. I'm very much trying to tackle the duality of showing like multiple faces of like the Black identity and the Black experience across, you know, multiple socioeconomic statuses and walks of life, as well as showing just these like group of teens who, without giving too much away, something terrible happens that leaves somebody dead. Drop a body up front. And they have to struggle with, oh crap, not only did this accident happen, but we're also all Black kids involved in this accident with this white boy who's also super rich and privileged. And it's just like, they're like, this was a complete and total accident. But, you know, the world, the society, the police, everybody is going to crucify us without even stopping to think that we might be innocent solely because we are Black. And so the book deals with that, like, trauma and strife and, you know, those very relevant and real world issues. And it just walks you through like the truth of what actually happened. And it's kind of like, oh, will they go to jail? Won't they? And along the way, because I am a huge sucker for I Know What You Did Last Summer, we very much get a that trope where one of their classmates finds out about the accident and they start receiving these death threats, and people start to stalk them, and just these really bizarre, kind of scary, chilling things start to happen, and they have to deal with that stress too.
Write faster. I want to read those.
Yeah, seriously, that all sounds great.
Yeah.
I need things, so okay. Yeah.
I need to read that.
Yeah.
I am, you know, I'm usually working on multiple projects. It's been tough in quarantine because my children are home and I love them, but they need to go be feral or somewhere
Right.
so that I can get some work done. But I'm doing revisions on this thriller I mentioned before. It's called Time Will Tell. It'll be out next year. It's about kids in the present dig up a time capsule that their parents buried when they were in high school, and when they open it up, they find evidence of a murder inside. And so the book goes back and forth between 1986 and the present as they're trying to figure out, what does this actually mean? What if anything did our parents actually do, and why? And at the same time, you're seeing the parents as teenagers in 86, in the events leading up to what was put into the time capsule. And, it started out, I thought, to put it in John Grisham terms, I thought I was writing The Firm, and it turns out I think I wrote A Time to Kill. There turns out, there's a lot of race, a lot of identity issues in there. I started writing it during the Supreme Court hearings for Brett Kavanaugh, which Brett Kavanaugh is close to my age. We both went to Yale. That brought up a lot for me. And so I started writing this, and it became a lot more political than I thought it was going to be, which I think is a good thing, but it definitely surprised me. So on top of that, I've got a science fiction thing that I'm playing around with, and I want to write my first adult thriller, which is about a guy who finds out his ex-wife is an elite CIA agent, who drags him into her world. And then I've got this crazy fantasy novel that I've been calling a feminist Game of Thrones that is just really like insanely huge, and like it's just crazy, and all these plot lines intersecting, and I just never feel like I have the time to properly work on it, but I'm hoping this fall I will have the time to put some effort into it. So there you go.
Exciting.
Super exciting.
So good.
Projects. So I've just finished revisions on a new YA thriller. It's about a girl who has the same type of brain inflammation that I've had like personal experience with, and I was really interested in sort of like writing that into a thriller, because one of my main symptoms when I had that, like before I lost my ability to speak and communicate, I had like episodes of psychosis where like I was hallucinating and seeing and hearing things that weren't actually existing like in real life. So I've been sort of like working on a thriller where like the main character is trying to solve like this real life mystery about the disappearance of her sister, but at the same time she's got these episodes of psychosis, and she can't tell like which things are real and which things aren't. And it draws really heavily on my own experience, because like it was just like this really strange time where like reality was like blurring with like this dream world around me, but everything looked absolutely real to me, and I couldn't tell which was real and which wasn't. So I've been playing with that idea a lot in like my latest thriller. So I've just finished up revisions on that for now. But yeah, I'm in like this weird sort of like stage at the moment where I'm not sure like what I'm going to work on next and what I want to write. And like, I know I want to write another thriller because like that's just like what I love to write now. But I've got like all these sort of like ideas sort of like marinating, and I just sort of like need to pick one and just sort of like commit to it. Because I've tried working on multiple projects at the same time, but I always then end up sort of like working solely on one and then feeling like guilty that I haven't written anything for the others. So I kind of just need to like stick to one at a time, I think. But yeah, I'm just sort of like, I don't know, I just need to find out which project that I'm going to work on, which one speaks to me most at the moment. So yeah.
Maybe a comment. I noticed something when you all were talking about your projects, and we didn't bring it up about YA thrillers, but another reason that YA thrillers are amazing is because they touch on the subjects that are so relevant today.
Yes.
These are real social issues, and they're not being sugar-coated for kids. They're not being spoon-fed. They are being thrown in those kiddos' faces, young people's faces, and I just love that they're not taking their readers for granted. They really are getting them involved, and it's just such a wonderful genre to be able to be that upfront with their readers. Yeah. You guys are amazing. Seriously. I'm sitting here writing about space clones and you guys are like taking on the real world. And yeah. You guys are amazing.
Yeah, should we finish up by talking about our all-time favorite YA thrillers and like which ones that we always recommend no matter what? So who would like to go first?
I'm not even done with Sadie, and I'm just going to say Sadie. It's
right. I think I have 3. So Tiffany D Jackson, everything she writes is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Her book, Let Me Hear a Rhyme, is my favorite because hip hop will always and forever be my first love as far as music goes. And she really does a fantastic job of blending like a story that's very much about hip hop. And the birth of it with, what she's the queen of thrillers. So, with that, and I just love it. Lamar Giles' spin, I love it for the same reason. It gives us more like, I guess, a modern story because I believe Tiffany's set in the 80s, I believe. And so that one gives us a modern story about a DJ. A body is dropped and it marries, the hip hop genre with, the thriller literary genre. And my third one, I mentioned this before, is The Unbecoming of Madeline Dyer. I think that may have been the first YA thriller, in current times that I read, and it just absolutely made me fall in love with the genre all over again.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I really like Alan Zadoff's Unknown Assassin trilogy, which is really great. It's about a teenager who's trained as an assassin, and he's the new kid in school who shows up, and then he becomes friends with somebody, and then he kills their parents, and then he disappears, and it's just amazing. And he, the reason I like it is there are so many places over the course, especially of the first book, but throughout the series, where he could sort of wimp out and play it safe, and instead he just floors it and just goes for it, and that's what made me decide, that's good stuff. There's a book by Paul Griffin called Burning Blue, came out a few years ago. Really, really great book about there's a girl who the most beautiful, most popular girl in school, and somebody throws acid in her face. And this hacker kid who's sort of on the periphery, he decides to figure out who did this and why, and it's really good. And then Nia mentioned Lamar Giles. I loved Overturned, which is a wonderful, wonderful novel about a girl growing up in Las Vegas, whose parents own a small casino. Her dad is framed for a crime and put in jail. And then the book begins, he's actually getting out of jail, and she's trying to deal with, she's been very independent and living a certain life without him around. And now her dad's suddenly back, and she's trying to figure out.
Oh.
Barry, are you muted? There you go.
Yeah, something happened there for a second, but I'm back.
Okay, good.
So anyway, Lamar Giles, Overturned, really, really great book.
Yeah, like I was just thinking about my favorite ones. I'm actually reading a Lamar Giles book right now.
It's the Lamar Giles fan club.
Right.
I gotta get on board, I guess. Right,
You have to.
Yeah, so yeah, Nia, what you were saying about Tiffany D Jackson, I absolutely love Monday's Not Coming.
Yes.
So that has to make one of my top 3 YA thrillers. I'm just trying to think of the other ones that I've read recently. Cracked Up to Be by Courtney Summers. Yeah, I love that one, and I love the sort of like emphasis on mental health as well. And the voice in that book, like that is just an amazing voice that is written, and just like, oh, it's just amazing. I cannot say enough good things about that book. Yeah, and my current read is The Wicker King by Ankrum, and I went into it like not knowing like what entirely to expect about it, because like I'd heard like a lot of really good things about the book, but I'd like purposely not sort of like read a lot about it, because I really like being surprised and like learning what a book is like on my own. But yeah, it's about these 2 boys who are like really good friends, and right at the start you know that one of them is like committed arson, and there's like fires, and you've got like one of the boys is like this quite like mentally unwell, and yeah, just like the exploration of mental illness through like the thriller genre, and like even the writing style, it's like a stream of consciousness as well, and I really love that. So like I've nearly finished that book now, so I haven't got to the ending yet, but I think that's probably going to be like one of my top 3 as well.
You guys are giving me a great list. I'm going to be busy this summer.
Yeah, anyway, thank you so much for joining me for the very first panel of YA ThrillerCon.
Thank you for organizing.
Thanks for having us.
Fun, yeah.
I'm so excited.
It's been so much fun, and yeah, as you were saying, Sarah, like we all just like got so many more recommended thrillers now to read, because like I'm gonna watch this back later and just like write down all the books I need to read, and like from all the other panels as well, because you can never have too many books on your.
I'll send you my list.
So yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.